So I was watching this nice video today which described the shadow side, and I'll talk about that a bit longer. I was talking about it with you the other day, and um, and it had a little bit of reaction from some people. They didn't like the idea that everybody has a shadow side, including myself. Everybody has it. It's part of being human. It's part of being an animal, and the problem that we have in our current society is we're conditioned to only be good and to show people only goodness. And so the idea that other people's intentions aren't good comes as a bit of a shock to people. But if you don't realize that everybody has the shadow side as well as the light side, as well as the good side, then often you'll be in conflict with life because you won't be understanding why people are behaving in a certain way or what people are asking from you or meaning. But first of all, we'll start with non-duality, because the shadow side is talking about the personality structure. So that's not actually non-duality. I know that's slightly complicated to imagine because most people imagine that you get enlightened. So when somebody's talking about enlightenment, they think, they're talking about my enlightenment and the personality is what gets enlightened. But it's not actually the personality that gets enlightened, is it, Khaleesi? You're certainly not an enlightened personality on one side, but on another side, an absolute enlightened personality. So what is non-duality? What is non-duality, Khaleesi? So non-duality to me is the most amazing subject there is. I love non-duality. I love speaking about non-duality and sharing it because it's absolute unconditioned love. It's not about you becoming a perfect person or you reconditioning yourself or you selling your soul to the devil or you going through the dark night of the soul or you paying lots of money or working every hour of the day or controlling the ego or surrendering the ego. It has nothing to do with the person. However, on the personality level, the person can be so busy that sometimes this message is really hard to hear beyond the person if the person is so loud and screaming, look at me, look at me, look at me. And so sometimes that personality structure has to settle down and become more balanced and more in line with itself, not more enlightened, but more in line with itself, which could be multiple different manifestations. But ultimately, non-duality's got nothing to do with what happens in the personality. Non-duality is remembering of something that's beyond the personality. This is so hard to talk about. It really is. I love it. It's the most beautiful thing there is we can talk about, but it's so incredibly hard. There's so many different ways you could phrase it and there's no right way. I think if I were to have my favourite, the one that my heart sings the most at, it would be the everything and nothing. That this is everything appearing as nothing. And that this experience now isn't personal, but is everything expressing itself, and that everything is not a thing. It's not limited to one thing, it's no thing, and it's everything. I love that expression of it, but that makes very little sense to the majority of people and very hard to teach or to speak about. So then my next favourite one would be the empty looking and the I am, and I really like that too. And that makes it slightly easier to talk about. So, we're going to start with the birth in this life, because in this life, you can remember back to being a child. You can't remember previous lives because your brain is only designed to remember this life. Your recording instrument can only remember in this life. So we're just going to talk about this life. We're not going to talk about past lives. Sometimes people have memories of past life because it's in your cells, it's in your DNA. But often that's quite abstract and religious to a lot of people. I had memories of last lives, and I still have memories that affect me in this life. Of last lives. I have a friend of mine that remembers being a dinosaur. I remember when he first told me that, I thought it was very humorous because he's a very straight person and just talking very straight and into the stock markets. And then he was like, when I was a dinosaur, I had an injury around my mouth, and so I often find doing this releases that injury. And I was like, So let's go back to this life. So when you were born, there were two qualities that were there that have been there in every experience. And those two qualities are this sense of existence, this I am, that this exists. Now that's not a memory. You might not be able to remember that when you were born, but the memory might not have been working when you were born, so you might not be able to remember that, but you can most probably conclude by deduction that it was there. So you have this I am, and you have this empty looking. So when you were a baby and you came out of the mother's vagina, which is really amazing and miraculous that we can grow babies in our tummy, that's really quite something, and then it comes out of our vagina, which is a funny hole to come out of because it might make more sense that it would come out of the mouth, as the mouth is a bigger hole, but it doesn't. It comes out of the vagina, which is really quite like magic. And there you are, you're suddenly alive. You suddenly exist. Now we imagine that we didn't exist prior to that, and then we exist as this new baby entity. But actually, who we truly are existed prior to that, but we just can't remember it because our brain only functions in this lifetime, with exceptions of some people who remember past lives. So, you were born, you came out of the vagina, or maybe there was a cesarean and you came out of the tummy. We don't know. And suddenly there was the world. There was everything. And there was this empty looking at everything. And this empty looking actually wasn't belonging inside the body. The baby didn't think, I am looking at the world from inside. The baby's experience was there was everything. And that looking was everywhere and was everything. The baby didn't know that intellectually, but that was the experience. The baby didn't know my looking is inside this body, and this is my hand, and this is my hair. Baby might not have had hair, and this is my nose. The baby just was. It didn't have a sense of inside and outside. It didn't know where it stopped and the world begun. The mother and itself were the same thing. The wall and itself were the same thing. The crib and itself were the same thing. It had no concept of inside and out. Not even a feeling of it at that age. If you look at a baby, because they get a bit older, they suddenly become aware of the hand. They're like, what is this? And they can't think this is my hand. This is something that comes as the brain cognitive abilities kick in more and begin to say and report, this is my hand. Even though they could function to an extent, so the baby, if it's eating, it can move towards the food to an extent, there is no cognitive recognition that it is doing it. At some age, that comes in. So it has this empty looking. It also has a sense of existence. It sense that it is. Some people call that I am, but all teachers call it different things, so don't rely on the fact that I'm speaking in the same way that other teachers do. Some people call the I am the first identity, but the sense of existence to me is the same as the empty looking. The empty looking I call the emptiness, and the I am I call the everything, the nothing and the everything. It's just my way of splitting up a subject that's impossible to even talk about, so it's something you're going to have to be creative with. And for some personality structures, they don't like it not being logical and all fitting into character categories. And if you are that, don't let it put you off. If you're feeling like, oh God, it's got to make sense, I don't like this chaos or it not making sense, just relax and it will eventually come clear. So just relax to these concepts and just let them wash over you. And when you're ready, they will come clear. Don't be freaked out by it not making sense. And those of you that enjoy chaos and maybe have a more creative and chaotic mind, or they are open to newness, then they'll enjoy this and they'll be like, ooh, something I don't understand. So the different personality types will respond differently. So, and don't think you might project her, she's a bad teacher, she can't put it well. It's not just me, everybody struggles. Other teachers might be more definite in the way that they explain it, like this is right, but that's just their teaching style. This is an impossibility to talk about because it's prior to language. It's the infinite, it's that which is prior to the dualistic reality, or the dualistic supposed reality. So then at some age, the baby begins to get this sense that it is inside this body, that it is a name, that it's called, say, Khalithi. Oh no, that's too confusing. That it's called Lily. So prior to that, the baby just was. It was limitless. Its consciousness was limitless. Its sense of existence was limitless. There was just everything, and there was nothing experiencing that everything. There was simply everything. Then at some point, something happens in the brain and in the body mechanism where the baby begins to feel like it exists inside this body, and it feels like somebody is in relationship with someone else. A friend of mine told me this really amazing developmental part with both their children. I'm going to do it with a fruit. Now this fruit is really, 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 really sour. It's obviously a wild orange, and I bought it at the market this morning not realizing. It tastes more like a cross between a very sour lemon and a very sour grapefruit. So when I throw it, I'm not wasting food. Nobody could possibly eat this. I don't think there's anything you could do with this. So in both his children, he noticed at a certain age, like 6 months to a year, or maybe it was older, the baby would get an object, it would look at an object, so it obviously had some form of sense of self at this age. Then it would throw the object over its head, like so. Khaleesi's off to examine. What is it, Isi? And what would happen is the baby would throw the object over its head, and the first stage would be the baby didn't respond. It was gone. There was nothing there. The lemon had gone. There was nothing there. Hey, E. Hello. Then the second stage was numéro 2. The second stage was the baby would take the object, it would throw it over its head, and then it would turn round and look. Well, is it Khaleesi? You see the orange? And it would do the same. It would take the object, throw it over its head, and then look. And repetitively, boop, and look. Hello, EE. Hello, you beautiful. Then, the third stage, we get a numéro 3. then you have to move out of the way, Khaleesi. Come on, Khaleesi. It would throw the orange over the head, and then it would cry. It wouldn't look, it would throw the orange over the head and it would cry. The baby would cry. Oh, is that fun? So, what happened in that experience? The baby at first threw the orange and didn't look and just didn't have any sense, was just gone. It was gone. The second one was it threw it over the head and it realised that it still existed when it was gone, and it turned round to examine. So the orange was thrown over the head, turned round, examined, it still existed. The third one was the baby threw the orange over the head, comprehended it was gone, and comprehended that it didn't have the orange anymore and cried. That it was gone, but it still existed, and it, as the baby, didn't have it anymore and it was gone. And this is the beginning of the sense of self. So prior to that cognitive ability kicking in, time didn't exist. So the question to you now, for you to ponder, is, does time actually exist? Is time a reality, or is it a functioning of our brain? Now that's so hard for us to comprehend because our thinking exists in time. So our thinking exists in past and future. Come on. So our thinking exists in past and future. But does it actually exist? Is it a reality? So right now, if we imagine an elephant, that's existing in time, that imagination. We're imagining an elephant from the past and we're putting it in our head. So does that actually exist? What about at night when you dream? So you go to bed at night and you dream a dream, and when you wake up in the morning, the dream is gone. Did it actually exist? Was there actually a timeline? Did somebody actually run around in a dream and find a lion and do a cartwheel and turn into an ant? Did that actually happen? When we think of a computer, so inside the computer, we have all these numbers, zeros and ones, I think, or this, yeah, zeros and ones. And we have all these lights connected to these zeros and ones, and it gives us pictures. So right now, to you, I am zeros and ones, the activating lights, and there's also sound, but I'm not sure how that happens. And you're seeing this. Does it actually exist? What am I now? You're watching me on a screen. Does time exist? Hello, Easty. See what's in this door now? Come on, Easty. On you go. Come on. I just realised it's quite noisy downstairs. I get so used to it. I've got a cafe below me. I get so used to the drunk people or the people drinking cafe, or sometimes they're singing. I completely forget that anyone else can hear it. I can tune it out. If I'm in the back of my apartment, you can't hear it. But I can't always be bothered to move back there. It's like I have to move the studio around. So does it actually exist? So I was sitting here a minute, I went away and then I came back. You are so convinced by your imagination, most people will answer yes, that definitely exists. But let's go back to what your actual evidence is. Your actual evidence is that there only is ever this moment. There is only now existing. That's actually what the evidence points to. Even if you've got a camera that's recording another time or another place, your actual experience is there's only ever presence, this present moment happening. What happens to us is when we begin to identify as that young child, that story, that timeline becomes so strong, we believe that's 100% real, and we forget the other side of life. We forget that who we truly are is presence. Who we truly are is this alive presence. And what we think is reality is the timeline, is our story about what's happening. So we get convinced by our story of what's happening. And this is why we begin to suffer, because we believe who we are is a limitation, when actually who we truly are is limitlessness, is wholeness, is oneness. And when we believe solely that we're a limitation, we are a limit. Like, there is the experience of this person, so in that experience of duality there is limitation and non-limitation, but ultimately who we are is non-limitation, is this love, is freedom. But when we are solely identified with that person and we forget about our infinite nature, then we begin to suffer. And what can happen in the human is there is this identification with the timeline, with believing that who you are is somebody moving in time, and then there can be this awakening which is energetic. It's not intellectual, it's not understanding non-duality, although that can happen prior to the awakening. It's this energetic shift where your energy goes back to that child, that infinite presence. So it's like you're watching, and your sense of I am expands back to everything. But different from the baby is there still manages to be this self-aware, complicated character. But that self-aware, complicated character is no longer sucking everything into itself and making it feel like you're only limited. So then what happens is you become infinite and non-limited, and you also are this character. You're experiencing this character that's experiencing a world and is able to think about yesterday and tomorrow and complex ideas. Huh? Makes sense? Yeah. This realization and this energetic shift seems to happen when studying non-duality and studying awakening. But we as humans cannot comprehend what the awakening path or process is, because ultimately on the ultimate level there is no time and there is no person to awaken, and there is no awakening process. But on the relative level, it seems that the person gets involved in this subject and it begins to question its knowledge and its fundamental beliefs and what it thinks it believes. It stops running away from that which scares it, and it understands itself. It becomes an honest person. It understands its shadow. It understands, or it's open to understanding its shadow. I have to admit that I'm still learning about the complexities of Lisa. But prior to that, I was totally open to this personality structure, and there wasn't a resistance to it. I didn't any longer have to be a good person. I could strive to be a good person, but I could see that I was all types of things, and really there was no good or bad person. There was infinite complexities. So it seems to be that the person for the awakening has to be open, has to stop running away from the pains of life. Life is pleasurable and painful. So stop running away from that which scares it and face that which scares it. And has to be truthful to itself. There has to be a level of honesty. And when that happens, the personality, it's almost like the personality lines up with itself more, and it's not so much in chaos. It's not so much in a desperate seeking for completion in time and in itself. It sort of settles down and begins to realize that completion is your infinite nature, which is only ever present. And that you'll never really find it in an object, in a thing. You'll never find it in an object or a thing or a person or a name or a subject or a experience. It's the infinite nature which is present now. And as that begins to be comprehended, that personality structure settles down a lot. And as it settles down a lot, then there can be the shift. But that path is unknown because really there is no path. And it's dependent on the personality structure that you're faced with. All personality structures are so complicated. Depends if you're an empath, a narcissist, a psychopath, a borderline personality, a regular personality. I don't even know all the names of the different personalities. Autistic, ADHD. And none of these things, including the psychopath, are against liberation. It's none of them are, it's not that you have to be the saint in order to get liberated. In order to get liberated, you have to be the courageous. You have to be willing to look at yourself. Honestly, look at yourself. And that is one of the hardest things for anyone to do. Everyone's like, oh, can I just avoid this and be good? Can I just avoid this and be victim? So the complexity of the personality structure, knowing yourself. The way I did it was that I was super lucky. I lived with a teacher who kept pointing out stuff to me, even though I didn't really like it. Him pointing stuff out to me, I could feel how beneficial it was after I realized. At the time when he pointed it out, it was like, oh, painful and uncomfortable. I didn't want to know. I particularly didn't want to know anything negative about myself. So can't I just be enlightened? Now today, let me have a look at my subject again. We're going to be, what is honesty and the shadow? So the way I did it was living with this teacher and meeting lots of different teachers, and I think also there was an openness in my personality because you see, I was just adjusting my light. Now I know loads of you'd like to project onto me that I was adjusting my light to help you guys, because if I have the perfect light then it will help you guys get enlightened. But actually I was adjusting the light so you could see my eyes better and I look more beautiful. Predominantly so you can see my eyes better. Not for you though, for me, because I want that, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, because I have very deep eyes. So now that is not unenlightened. Although everybody's like, I've got to get rid of my vanity and my ego. You've not got to get rid of any part of your personality structure. Although I would always say strive to be kind, but strive to be kind knowing that you maybe don't want to be kind. What it is getting to know yourself, getting to know and accept about yourself that you like, say, looking beautiful, or you like being powerful, or you like picking your nose, whatever it is. These dynamics though in childhood are told to you as being undesirable dynamics. So what the mind does is it completely suppresses them, and it tries to only produce and be and tell itself the dynamics which it's being praised for. So it's been praised to not pick its nose. It's being praised to be friendly. If you're a woman, maybe you're being praised to be gentle. If you are a woman. It's easier for me to say woman because I was conditioned to be a woman, even though secretly I'm a man. I'm joking. Be gentle. If you're a woman, maybe you're being praised not to be too intelligent or be more intelligent than your brother. When I was working in this school, this is how deep it goes about intelligence and women. I was working in this school in a very deprived area of London, and the majority of the school were second generation Bangladesh. And in the school, if they received more money, it meant they could feed more kids. So if they received good marks from the kids, they could receive more money from the government and feed the kids. So a lot of kids were very poor and didn't get that much to eat at home. So the school gave away free lunches. And in order to get maximum of benefits, they had to get good grades from the kids. So the teachers were instructed to focus on the boys in the class because they knew that the boys would be more encouraged at home to follow intelligence. So I only worked there for 3 months and I had to quit afterwards when I realised, because I just couldn't take doing that. So basically what they would do is the teacher would only encourage and ask the boys. So if they asked a question, 10 times 3, and the kids put their hands up, they would just focus in on the most intelligent boys and just engage the boys and not engage the rest of the class. So you might have been conditioned to say be intelligent or not be intelligent, and what you'll do is you'll push the other into the subconscious. So you'll have the desire to be intelligent and be more intelligent than, say, your brother or your father, but you're told you're not allowed to do that, so you'll push it away and you'll pretend that you're not. But deep down, there is a desire to be intelligent. So what you might do is you might be passive-aggressive with that, but have no consciousness of it. So how that would act out is you will secretly try to put down other men or women with the intelligence, but you won't be conscious of it. What you'll be conscious of is, oh no, I'm not that intelligent or something. I have a little bit of a funny relationship around intelligence because I only recently discovered I was highly intelligent. I was dyslexic at school, so I was always told I wasn't intelligent, even though they knew I was highly intelligent because they did a test, but nobody told me. So I didn't realize that I had high intelligence. So I have a bit of a funny relationship. So you might have heard me say in past videos that I'm not very intelligent because I thought that I didn't have that high intelligence. I thought I had like slightly high intelligence, but actually I have quite high intelligence. But I have some bizarre conditioning around that. So basically, coming aware of your shadow is just coming aware of what you're pushing down, and that might not necessarily change. So you still might be in a situation where you are trying to prove your intelligence, but you know it's conscious. You're playing the game awake. Most humans aren't aware they're playing a game. They wouldn't even admit that they're playing a game, but you're always playing a game as a human. In playwriting, when they taught you to playwright, you didn't really have to know the psychology of the character. You had to know and understand the psychology of what the characters wanted. And that was how they taught to act as well. It's all about wants. So all of us have these wants, and we're always playing to achieve these wants. When we're not conscious of them, we do bizarre things, but our body is gently steering us in that direction. So say, I was listening to a psychologist on the internet today who was really making me chuckle. I'm not going to tell you the psychologist's name because politically I don't agree with him all the time, but he's a genius and he's brilliant. But politically he's got some sometimes suspect politics. Anyway, he was making fun today about feminists. Now, I might get a lot of emails criticizing me. I'm not saying I agree with this, but I understand his point, and it really demonstrates well what I mean by the shadow. Okay. So, and I used to notice this in peace activists. I noticed this when I used to, I was an activist for animals, believe it or not. I know that seems like I never talk about that. That's like an impossibility that I could be an activist for animals, but surprisingly I am. I even have a jumper here, which some of you might be interested in. But so he was talking about feminists, and this really made me chuckle, because when I was a peace activist, I quite quickly realized that the peace activists were not peaceful at all. They had more hate than I'd ever witnessed before. But I am not a nugget. I am not a nugget. I am to Khaleesi, but she's an exception. She's not self-conscious. Yeah, I'm sorry. I know that's going to create some people clicking off. They're like, she doesn't have the same belief as me, therefore I can't listen to her. I can only listen to people that have the same belief as me. She's an animal activist, therefore we cannot listen to her. But I'm not an animal activist anymore. I just pay other people to be. But that shirt supports an organization that I support. Anyway, back to, so this is a good example. Like with this guy, I really like watching him, but I don't exactly enjoy his politics, but I just take what I like. Everyone's allowed their own opinion, and everyone will have their unique individual opinion, and that's nice. That's the way we should all be, is respecting each other's opinions. Not actions, but yeah. So he was saying about the feminists, like this. So he was saying that the feminist movement had this something big politically happen. I can't remember what it was he said. I was trying to tell my friend earlier. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something like, maybe it was something like gay marriage had become legal, although that's not particularly feminist, but there was something politically that happened for the feminists that was very good for the feminists. Then, at the same time this was happening, the book that got released and was the international bestseller and sold millions and millions of copies was 50 Shades of Grey, which I've never read and I've not watched the films, but apparently it's sexually about sadomasochism or dominatrix. And so the feminists that are fighting for equality have just run a really great equality battle, but the women, because this book was bought predominantly by women, the book that they were buying and fascinated by was a book about dominatrix. So this is the shadow. So psychologically, these feminists had won equality. So the women had won equality, you'd like to say, and then the women were going out and buying a book about dominatrix. So this is what the shadow does. So it's the same when I was with the peace activists. So they were screaming peace. All they wanted was peace. They said they were going to these marches and they were screaming for peace and rights and equal rights for animals. And it's not that I'm against that intellectually, like that's the ideal. But when I spent time with them, I was driving them home one day. This is when I was just getting to know them. And one of the guys was saying, if I'd understood the system of activism from the beginning, because he was watched by the police or something, I don't know. I was really young, I was like 19 and really new to this world. He said if I'd known it, I would have been a suicide bomber for animals' rights. Like he was now watched by the police and he was saying he couldn't be a suicide bomber. And I'm driving along and everyone was like, yeah, and agreeing with him. And I was like, on! Hang on! How? This is what the shadow side is. So my teacher used to say, watch out for the ones that scream for peace. So why are they screaming for peace? And if they're fixated on peace, don't you notice that they need to fixate also on hatred and destruction? It's like they're obsessed with both. It's like in order to be a peace activist, you need somebody destroying something. Like imagine if everything was suddenly peaceful, what would the peace activists do? Would they be satisfied? Like, and this is what the shadow is, and this is what he was commenting on the feminist movement. It's like the feminists had got equality, and then they were fixating subconsciously on this dominatrix book, where I assume, I haven't read the book, that it's about women being dominated or the woman being a dominatrix, which is something that they're fighting against now. They're fighting for equality, that everybody's even, but then unconsciously in the back door, masses are going towards dominatrix. So this is what our personality structures do. And because we've been told these things are bad as child, we've pushed them into our unconscious and we act out the opposite. So you can notice it in yourself. So I can't think of one now. I can only ever think of ones in myself. So if I were... So if you're not conscious of it, so if you are somebody that's wanting to save people, then you're always attracted to people that are in danger. But you're not conscious of that part, that you're attracted towards people in danger. What you're conscious of is the savior part, and you might even feel victim, that you always come in contact with people that have problems. But you're not conscious that you're unconsciously attracted towards that. You see what I mean? So I know Lisa. I'm not going to tell you all Lisa's little games, because not actually because I mind admitting them. If I knew you in person I would, but I mind admitting them online where my mum could see. I admit a lot to her, but I don't want to embarrass her or anything. No, most probably do, but like not like, because these sorts of things, I mean, these sorts of things can create war from other people. People can get so outraged by these sorts of things. It's like the sort of thing where you're on YouTube and you love dogs, and then on YouTube something on the side comes up, like dog fight or something, and then your attention is attracted towards seeing what a dog fight would look like. This isn't that you're weird or that you're bad, that all humans do that. All humans have these opposite sides, and we're all players. We all want something out of a situation. On the human level. So ultimately it's just happening on the absolute level. But on the human level, it's all done in patterns. So my pattern on the human level, say with these talks, like I really get something out of seeing people change and grow and expand. And the reason that is because in my childhood there was an absence of that. I had a lot of illness in my family, so there was a lot of stagnance and staying still, so I get a lot out of seeing that. Now some people can say that's saint-like behavior. It's just very good conditioning for this type of job. I get more out of that than I do for financial payment, but I also like financial payment. That seems like such a dream job to actually be paid for this as well. So if you are sitting there thinking about, should I donate for this? Go ahead, donate. That's lovely for me as well, to be paid for that. I love it. I love things expanding. So I love giving people information that helps them expand. And I love it in myself as well. I love that. But note that in order for me to do that and express to you, there has to be people that are less expanded than me, otherwise no one would listen. And that's the reality of it. So I love it, but there's the other side to it. And all of us have this in everything. And we are so ashamed of this, we fear it. I remember when I was younger and I first took drugs, I used to be afraid there was a monster inside of me. And I think that most people feel like that. It's because they haven't integrated their animal side. And a lot of these spiritual practices are sometimes about integrating an animal side, like connecting back with nature and an animal. Like when I did ayahuasca and shamanism, my animal was the wolf. I am the she-wolf, which has negative and positive sides. People often see the wolf as negative, but it's not negative at all. The wolf is an animal that will die for its pack, will do anything for its pack. It shares its food with its pack. Everything is about the pack. It's the hero. The wolf is the hero. Like the top wolf doesn't go at the front of the pack, the top wolf goes at the back. Because if anyone's going to be left behind, it will be the pack leader, not the weaker ones, not the old or the sickly at the back. If anyone's going to be attacked from the back, it will be the pack leader. Isn't that cool? So the second in charge leads the pack, and then the pack leader is at the back and will take the fall for anyone. But they're fierce. They're fierce. They fight to death. They're warriors. That's my animal. I am a warrior. I dared to look at myself. I dared to inquire. It's the most scary thing you'll ever do. More scary than somebody in the forest. The fears in your mind are more scary than anything you can imagine outside of yourself, but that is your mind. So yeah, so that's the dark side and the shadow. Well, I've talked a lot now, so I'll now go to Skype.